Hi, everyone. This is Joni McGarry. Thank you so much for tuning in. My guest today is Sonia Elijah. She is an independent investigative journalist and the author of 311 Viral Takeover. On March 11th, 2020, a pandemic was declared and our world was changed forever. It is a remarkable book that managed to be both a meticulous and detailed historical document and a real page turner. It is highly accessible and super easy to read and loaded with facts. Everyone should have this on their bookshelf just simply to preserve the historical record of what happened during COVID. But before we dive in, I want to tell you about Crowd Health and why I got rid of my health insurance this year. I was paying a fortune for coverage and was tired of being part of a broken system. So I joined Crowd Health instead, and I'm very glad I did. Crowd Health isn't insurance, it's a crowdfunding platform where members fund each other's medical expenses. You pay $60 a month to be a member, and then once a month, you're asked to cover another member's bill. You always know what the maximum ask upfront will be, and most months it's far less than that. In 5 years, they funded 99.9% of all requests. So I'm saving thousands and I actually feel covered. To join, you just have to be under 65 and relatively healthy. There are no enrollment periods and no waiting. Go to joincrowdhealth.com and use the code JONI, JONI, for a discount on your first 3 months. Links are in the show notes. Now let's get to the show. Sonia Elijah, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me.
And thank you, Joni, for inviting me on your show.
I'm excited to talk about your remarkable book. It's backward in the screen, but 311 Viral Takeover. And I have read this book. And as I said in my intro before we started recording, it's a book that is remarkable in that it's a detailed investigation, fact finding mission, chock full of details. But it reads like a page turner. It's highly accessible. It's part of the historical record, and it's just a remarkable book. So thank you for writing it. But before we get to dive in on the book, I just want to ask you to tell us a little bit more about your background, what you do, what you've been up to, and how you came to write this book. Like what prompted you to see things in this way and get started on such a project?
Right, absolutely. Yes, my background, I guess, isn't always, research. I started off as a BBC researcher, and but the investigative reporting really sort of came out of COVID. I started that in sort of 2021. Began doing my own investigations, primarily because the media, I mean, what we were hearing on the news, they were just doing an abysmal job in telling us what was really going on. So my sense that things weren't quite right, I was quite, I clocked that quite early on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I just thought, I have quite an analytical mind and I do love research and deep diving into things. So I just thought, I just wanted to do my own investigations. And that led, to my debut piece at the Conservative, well, formerly known as the Conservative Woman, now it's TCW Defending Freedom. And that was all about school closures.
Mm-hmm.
So I started because I'm a mother myself, homeschooling the kids because the schools were all closed. So, and then one thing led to another. Then I was writing about lockdowns and the whole testing. And so really the book, it's a culmination of 5 years of my investigative reporting. But I would say the last 3.5 years was when I was really focused on putting it together. And it was a very uphill process because I just thought, how will this all tie together
Mm-hmm.
for it to be a cohesive body of work, for it to flow well, but then capture all these different facets of what was going on, because it's like a ball of string. You kind of unravel it and it's just another thing you discover, and then you discover something else. And so really it was a very organic investigation because one thing really led to another. But I would say doing the timeline in the beginning, the appendix,
Hmm.
I think really was like the skeleton of the book, because everything sort of hung on that. And that gave it an anchor. And I
Hmm.
think without doing the timeline, I think it would have been quite a sort of fragmented um, book. So yeah, I hope I've answered your
No,
question
the
there.
timeline is excellent, and it does because there are so many moving parts at every single step of this process, and the timeline does help you have a backbone to it because it really starts um, in the book at the virus comes to light, and then the first thing in the book is for what I when I was reading it, the thing that was interesting to me is there was all of a sudden it didn't seem like a real search for truth on the origins of the virus, but it seemed more like a sort of quasi truth search, but then a lot of jockeying to make a narrative of it. And this seems to be a pattern over and over at every step of everything that happened. So I think if you wrote a novel, it would like be the theme of it. So can you tell us a little bit more about what you discovered in the
Mm,
origins of this
yeah.
virus and
Yeah.
the players and these documents you uncovered that told more of the truth than what maybe the media was telling at the time?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think those Freedom of Information Act released emails, those Anthony Fauci emails, was sort of the starting point of that.
Hmm.
And obviously going through all those emails and sort of seeing the narrative in that, that was my sort of source of material there, and drawing things out, sort of joining the dots, and obviously going back to the timeline, because those dates are really key.
Hmm.
But even before we, let's say, let's bring it back before January 2020, even going back to 2019, you see these pandemic exercises coming into force, starting with Crimson Contagion, led
Could you say
by
a little bit more about what that is for people who might not know?
so these are these sort of pandemic simulation exercises. And it was run by, so it was actually led by Lieutenant Colonel Robert Cadleck, he was actually quite a key figure in the COVID response, but even before that, he's really involved in the sort of rise of the biodefense industrial complex
And
that we saw.
that's a name that most people have never heard,
Yeah,
which is,
yeah.
yeah, he has quite a history,
Y-
but go on.
Yeah, he's quite a history. So the book does he comes in and out, yeah, of the book, and sort of the beginning and also at the end, but sort of coming out of 9/11. And that we could also talk about the title of the book. So
Hmm.
out of 9/11, we see this sort of this rise of this sort of a disruptive event, a
Hmm.
crisis, and then out of that we have obviously this fear being whipped up, this weaponization of fear as well. And out of that, we have expanded powers of the state. So we've got,
Yes.
the rise of the Patriot Act. For 2020, we had the Coronavirus Act and its sort of equivalents around the world. So I see 3/11, which is March the 11th, 2020. This is when the WHO, the World Health Organization, declared COVID-19 a pandemic. And this pivotal point. Um, so and just how 9/11 was that critical point
Hmm.
that resets society, because this is what we're seeing. We're seeing this reset going on, shaping, everything comes out of that. So um, going back to those pandemic exercises, so Crimson Contagion was run by Robert Cadleck,
Hmm.
who's also very instrumental in all these coming out of 9/11, and this again, this rise of this biodefense industrial complex, millions and hundreds of millions, billions going into these countermeasures for threats, whether it's a natural or
Hmm.
virus or accidental release of a virus. So
And these are military countermeasures, which
yes,
defined the post 9/11 attacks, and then
yes,
the pandemic response.
yes,
So anyway,
yes,
so you talk about
yes,
countermeasures. I just wanted to point
yes,
out that they're military
yes. They're
countermeasures.
military, yes, exactly. And so with the Crimson Contagion, so you have a group of tourists. So this is the sort of
The
this is the
setup.
storyline. Yeah, the
Yeah.
setup. Traveling to China, they contract like a pneumonia-like virus. They bring it back. It spreads in the States, and then this is the whole pandemic. It's like how can how resilient are we to cope with a spread of a novel virus? And also, though, that summer in July in 2019, you had the Manhattan Project, which was this, again, by US biodefense panel discussion being set up. I think it was in New York City. And Robert Cadlick's on the panel there. And he is saying how we need to be, we need to amp up, we're not ready, we've got to be more resilient if there's again this virus to be able to cope. And we've got to, I think he said we've got to go large or go home, or go big or go home, or something. So there's sort of like, again, this idea of we need a lot more funds going into this sector. And then you had, out of that, you have Event 201 taking place that fall. And Event 201, which was that was run by the World Economic Forum, the John Hopkins Center of Health Security, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So this was a very telling, again, it's a pandemic simulation exercise. It's actually, that was a coronavirus. They as their sort of storyline. And what is very interesting out of that is that the recommendations that they put forward is that the public and private sector need to work together and combat misinformation, because they see misinformation being almost like public enemy number one. This idea of an infodemic happening, like this spread of misinformation. So for the next pandemic, we need to be prepared for that. So they suggest that, again, nimble approaches need to take place between governments and social media companies. So they flag this, that they need to work together and combat misinformation in real time.
And this was months before anyone had
Months
ever heard about COVID-19.
Exactly, months before. And so that was really interesting, because out of that you have, I mean, we can jump into the Trusted News Initiative, which is this big censorship apparatus that was used. So the Trusted News Initiative was the kind of, this is what we saw coming out of that. So the recommendations was, we need a nimble approach. We need public and private sector working together to combat misinformation. On the March 27th, 2020, so now, the pandemic was declared March 11th. Like just 2 weeks later, we have TNI, Trusted News Initiative, which is a network that cuts across big tech, governments, legacy media. All of them work together. It's a coordinated network to go after misinformation, dis, and malinformation.
And this is a mere 2 weeks after the pandemic is
2 weeks
declared,
exactly.
even though we don't know what it is. We don't know if there is going to be misinformation or bad. That is so telling. And it's interesting that you set it up that way, because something so vital that played such a role and continues to play a role in censorship and dampening voices of dissent was already teed up before the pandemic even started.
100%. Exactly, wow. Jody. You hit it on the head there. So it really was. And so this proves that this is not an organic response. Like, we don't know what it's a very coordinated response. It's a very planned response. So they've been planning it for a while. This is just what the sort of book points to. And So we have the TNI, and so this is the operational aspect of it. So it, takes those Event 201 recommendations, that becomes a reality the following year. And we see essentially an unprecedented mass use of censorship by Western governments. Okay, this is in the
Mm-hmm.
West. Not in China. We're talking about the UK,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
West, Germany, all of these places. So, and the book really goes into disseminating the whole, the censorship apparatus that they used. And, or, we have all the fact checkers. It's like, it is a machinery.
Mm-hmm.
So I do unpick it like that, and the final chapters do a lot of the focus is on that. That's sort of one of the main themes.
Well,
Um,
it's one of the scaffolding, it's the machinery that now is in place very firmly. That apparatus remains
yes,
post, COVID,
yes,
pandemic, whatever. And what's interesting to me is that it's in place 2 weeks after the announcement of the pandemic, when all of the narrative starts to come out about the origins, the
yes.
safety, the
Okay.
and so
Yes.
it's almost like it didn't even have a chance to
Yes.
have the tires kicked on the party line.
Absolutely. And obviously, we will talk now about the origins, because I know that was your original question.
No, that's
S-
but no, you take this wherever you need to go because like I was saying before, I read the book, but there's so many facts in it, I can't keep it in my head. So
yes.
it's so good, and you know it
Yeah.
better than I do. So,
Yeah, no. And obviously, your audience has to bear with me, because it's hard for me to keep all the facts in my head too. But
but they should
um,
all get the book. But go on.
yes, yes, definitely. I encourage them to read the book. So yes, so going back to those emails, those sort of Fauci emails. So we have around sort of late January 2020, we've got these emails buzzing around between like Fauci, Francis Collins, who was leading the
Hmm.
NIH. Fauci obviously was head of NIAID at the time. And you have actually, just as also an interesting date, January 13th is when NIAID's Vaccine Research Center, and Moderna decide on the genomic sequence for the vaccine for Moderna's Spikevax, which is very, very telling. Just 3 days prior, January 10th, is when the actual SARS-CoV-2 virus is publicly shared, the genomic sequence. And you have just literally 3 days later, the Vaccine Research Center with Moderna deciding on, the
That's
sequence
re-
for
that's very,
Spikevax.
very fast. I
Yeah,
don't know
very,
enough about the technology there, but it seems very
yeah,
fast that they were
it
at
is.
the ready.
Yeah, at the ready. But going back to the origins, so you have this, the emails basically show that these leading groups of scientists, this sort of the elite, the scientific elite, you've got Sir Jeremy Farrar, who was leading the Wellcome Trust at the time.
And can
Obviously,
you just talk about a little bit, what is the Wellcome Trust and how is it funded? And just so it sets up who Jeremy Farrar is for somebody who might not know.
yes, yes. And obviously encourage people to read the book to go really into the details of that organization. But it's a philanthropic organization. It's a UK based sort of charity,
Hmm.
and it funds research, scientific research. And yeah, I mean, the funding, I mean, a lot of it also comes from the UK government and other NGOs funneling money towards it. But it is one of the most wealthy of these
Hmm.
organizations. So Sir Jeremy Farrar, you have them all sort of, what gets them really rattled, and this is what I really sort of zone, and the book does this, I kind of zone in, I kind of zoom in and zoom out with things. So January 31st, you have a group of scientists from India, publishing a paper, and it's called the Pradham et al. Study. And they put it on a preprint server. And what these scientists discover is that SARS-CoV-2, when they analyze it, especially looking at the spike protein of the virus, has 4 HIV-like inserts, and it says, I think the paper's called the uncanny similarity of SARS-CoV-2 with HIV,
Mm-hmm.
And this is a really explosive paper. It hits like a grenade because 3 days later, you have that paper being wiped out, withdrawn. It's gone. It disappears. And you have these scientists, Fauci, all of these guys saying, what do we, this paper is so outlandish. What are we going to, have you read this paper? So they're flagging it to one another, being very alarmed. Okay, so you have that now paper going away, just being swept away. You have I think you have you have them already coordinating the proximal origin paper.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The first chapter basically solidifies these 3 pivotal papers that are published in these prestigious scientific journals like Nature Medicine,
Mm-hmm.
The Lancet, Cell, and they basically anchor in the natural origin story. That's the narrative that they want everyone to believe.
And it's
And
and the emails really show that they're not completely on board with this. Like
no,
they don't even really believe it
no,
themselves.
they don't.
Um,
They don't. You
but
have
for
this.
whatever reason, they're shutting down the other narrative. And it's not clear to me whether they knew something or they thought it was a political problem or they were covering up something.
They absolutely believe that the lab origin theory is highly plausible. They have, you have them saying it like this
Mm-hmm.
is, there's no way this could be a natural. I mean, some of these scientists saying that. So you've got like Robert Gary, Christian Anderson, and so they are in private completely, believing that this is plausible. It's come out of a lab, whether it's been accidentally released or on purpose. I mean, that's to do with intent. You can't, I can't write about that, but they
Mm-hmm.
do think that it's a lab, it's coming from a lab. But in public, a completely different story is presented. So they decide, so February 1st is that first teleconference call. And so I really write about that. I analyze these emails running up to the February 1st teleconference and what comes out of it. And what comes out of it is really interesting. There's a sense of relief, like, oh, I'm so glad we're all on the same page. I'm so glad we're acting. It's like a slapping themselves on the back.
Mm-hmm.
And you have this paper out of this discussing this proximal origin paper, which was led by the lead author being Christian Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
But what is really interesting is Sir Jeremy Farrar's involvement, heavy involvement in that paper. He's not listed as an author. So if you look at that paper, he's
Mm-hmm.
not one of those. He's not listed. But he literally essentially is the editor of that paper because he's telling them to change lines. Can you use this word instead of that word? Can you? So he's already like he's in charge, and they are thanking him, like almost, I think Christian Anderson, thank you for being like the father of the paper.
So what do you
And
make of his absence as an author?
yes, exactly. It's very telling. He wanted to stay under the radar. So he didn't want to have, be that to come
Mm-hmm.
out. So it was very secretive, that his involvement with the paper, and also Fauci's involvement, because remember there was, I think, a press thing. He had a press conference where he's sort of introducing this paper, going, "Oh, there's this paper coming," and he's as if he's completely distant and he doesn't
Right.
even know but he is literally in teleconference calls with these lead authors and heavily involved as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, but in public, it's like he's, completely not connected at all. So the narrative is very cemented from the beginning. Now, going back to censorship, so you have anyone discussing the possibility of a lab origin is smeared, blacklisted, vilified,
Mm-hmm.
deplatformed.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the TNI, this Trusted News Initiative, completely pounce on anyone who is discussing this are the scientists who are, very knowledgeable virologists going, this is, so it's, it becomes very obvious that this is they're pushing forward one narrative that everyone is to believe, and any sort of any scientific discourse discussing something else, an alternative, are labeled as fringe and
Mhm.
dangerous and all of that. So
And that's a theme that carries on through the whole pandemic. And um, in this particular case, it seems like it's not really justifiable. Like, maybe I don't know enough about the politics of all of it, but it seems to me Origin Lab, whatever, like that wasn't necessarily a safety issue for the public. It seems like the public would be served to understand what really happened. Um, in
yeah,
other censorships, they would use public safety as a reason why they censored. So obviously they're hiding something, or they
yeah,
have an agenda on the origin story. But then we move into how they're starting to set up policy, and it seems to be the same subterfuge even when all the facts are known, for
yes,
lockdowns and
yes,
the
yeah,
the modeling for how many people were going to
yeah,
die from this. And I want to move into a little bit of that because I found it
mm,
to be all of a piece again with the same players and the same evidence that you showed. You're not speculating. You have a bazillion footnotes and you show your work. So when they went into like, we've got this virus now, and we're going to approach it in a certain way because so many people are going to die.
yeah,
Can you talk about that modeling and then what
yeah.
went on? Like, because Ferguson, Niall, is it Niall or Neil Ferguson?
Neil, it's Professor Neil Ferguson
Right.
from the
Who,
Imperial College London
yeah.
University.
So, this was bumping along. And then if you want to talk about that, so we can
Yeah,
move into this part of it,
yeah,
because
absolutely.
it's the same tenor of
Yeah, yeah, no, it's
approach.
that's a really important point to pick up on. So you have so his was called yeah, he they from so he's the lead author of this paper. It comes out of Imperial College London. Um and this was around March 2020. Leaders of different governments, they're discussing, do we lock down, do we stay open? I think there's sort of, I know that Boris Johnson and also Trump at the time was very not keen on locking
Right.
down. They didn't want to just lock up the economy. And but you have this report come out that gets released early on to obviously these leaders. I mean, it gets published at a later date, but you almost have them do a U-turn, all based on this paper. And this paper comes out to be heavily flawed, right? Heavily flawed.
And he doesn't have
Um,
a great track record with
and his
predictions
track
either.
record is abysmal.
Yeah.
So his catastrophic predictions, known to be, his have caused billions in damage to the UK economy, culling at millions of animals that didn't need to be culled. From all these different the swine flu virus, again catastrophic, the foot and mouth disease, all of that. So he's got a horrible track record of getting it wrong
Mhm.
and overinflating the chaos or the deaths coming out of it, and then hardly anything happens. So, but for some reason, the UK government, again, he's a key advisor, and the book does talk about these unelected scientific advisors, unaccountable to anyone,
Mhm.
unelected, that are essentially running the show, like leading the policies, these the COVID response. And you have, so out of this paper, so there's many flaws. Obviously the technical details people can read, but he bases it on the exponential growth of the virus, which is not true, and they knew that to be untrue because in February 2020 you had the Nobel laureate Michael Levitt in the US saying we're not getting an exponential growth, it's slowing down, right? The spread of the virus is slowing down. And that was known. And even in the emails, this is the Fauci emails,
Yes,
they're discussing that. Yeah.
so
So it's
he's
not like
Fauci's
they
aware
didn't
of
know.
this paper at the same
Yeah.
time, and
Yeah.
for whatever reason, they
Yeah.
dismissed that paper even
Yeah.
though this guy's solid.
Yes.
Um, and
Exactly.
so then everyone goes into lockdown,
We go into
based on
lockdown.
well, we can say it's based on that data, but maybe it isn't. Maybe that was an excuse. It's so hard to say because at the same time, the PrEP Act is being invoked,
Oh, yeah.
and the
Yeah.
the race to vaccine it's off to the races.
Yeah.
So if you want to talk a little bit about that and how rapidly that progressed, because again, this all goes lockstep in the story and it's a narrative. If you want to, and you don't
Yeah,
have to actually
absolutely.
go through all the details. You can talk about how you found out or, whatever you'd like to do there, because it's
Yeah.
remarkable work.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. So yeah, I mean, I want to definitely touch on the behavioral scientists and their involvement,
Yes.
um, um, which is, out of lockdown, because really, I mean, if you think about it, it's so unprecedented what went on. They managed to convince people to not leave their homes for like almost a year and a half, if you think
Right.
about it,
To
to
not
be
go to
literally,
work.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's crazy. It's so crazy. So you think, how did they do that? How did they manage to get away with that, to coerce people? Or they made people very afraid. They absolutely weaponized fear, and the behavioral scientists were heavily involved. And it was a major psychological operation, again, which is a military strategy, um, major psyop there. So they spent hundreds of millions of pounds. I know in UK, and I'm sure every country did the same thing, because
Mhm.
almost like it was
It was
like the
it
same
was all
campaign.
coordinated,
It was
yes.
all, the same sort of ad campaign. For the virus. And it was Project Fear. So they hundreds of millions spent on government messaging: stay home, grandma's going to die if you go out, or stay home to protect. Here we had protect the NHS so it doesn't get overwhelmed.
The
But then you
NHS is
have
the National Health
the
Service
National
there.
Health
Mhm.
Service we have here, yeah. But then you have footage of these empty hospitals and these
Right.
empty wards, okay, which is just
And
what is
dancing nurses.
dancing nurses, the phenomenon of the dancing nurses. Anyway, so the use of fear was an integral part that was played out to get people to stay home and do all of these things and to comply.
Mhm.
And you have even, there's a lot of exhibits in the book. So I really wrote it as like a live indictment of everything. So it's as if I was presenting like a legal case, and
Mhm.
all the exhibits, the screenshots of all these different documents, government documents. So you have a government document, um, of a government meeting with these behavioral scientists, and it's like a table, and I kind of highlight it, and how they're saying we need to increase the sense of fear. So personal threat, a threat of fear, use media to do that. Peer pressure. They wanted to use peer
Mhm.
pressure,
Oh, yeah.
and all of these things. So it was a major psyop.
But let me
And
ask you, was there in those documents, was there any evidence that these people saying, "We need to make everyone really afraid," were they approaching it because they really believed based on their own evidence that people were dropping dead like flies in the streets? Because it was so like, if you looked around at the time, what you were being told to fear, it was not happening in your real life. Like, I'm not
yeah,
saying people didn't die from
yeah,
COVID or from the treatments that were foisted upon them, but I
yeah.
just wonder, like, what was the motive? And I know you can't really be in these people's heads, but did it seem like they were just all in on the project, or were they too very afraid?
Okay, so it's a really interesting question. And what my mind immediately goes to, were they really afraid? Don't forget they had lockdown parties, the elite. So you have, going on at Downing Street, and in New York City you had one of your top public health
Oh,
officials
that
having
guy.
drug-fueled sex parties. So yeah, these guys weren't really afraid. They knew. I mean, and we knew early on, I think it was John Ioannidis, from a Stanford professor, talking about 0.1% was the fatality ratio, fatality rate, 0.1% if you're under 70, which is comparable to a severe flu season.
Right,
So they
right.
knew that very early on. That was, that's documented. So yeah, you have the lockdown parties, which I talk about, which I write about in the
Mhm.
book. And so what hypocrisy, right? So you have people, you obviously, they can't attend their loved ones' funerals. I mean,
Right.
this is such a huge crime. They can't go to be with their loved ones, as they're dying. They can't go into care homes. And it's just, I think that was just what, you know, it's awful. It's awful
It's
how they
like a
treated
crime against humanity, especially for the
yeah,
elderly.
yeah,
Um,
for the
so
elderly, and the way they treated the elderly, and the way they were quietly dispatched with these end of life care protocols, which I really go into because
mhm,
we had the COVID inquiry here. It is essentially, it was one big whitewashing exercise, but there were some interesting things that came out of that. I read a lot of the transcripts, a lot of the testimonies that were given during the inquiry, and yeah, I mean, it's like these you have people saying, they were dying not from COVID, but
right.
from being administered morphine,
Mhm,
midazolam, all of these things, and not given any antibiotics, which really, if they were contracting like a pneumonia like virus, antibiotics would have been a good thing to have given them. But no, they were put on either ventilators or given these sort of end of life protocols if they were elderly. And you saw those excess deaths coming out of that.
mhm,
Um, and obviously removing everybody out of hospital and putting them into care homes. There was
mhm,
that as well.
mhm.
So it was really, really egregious, all the events that happened. And this, yeah, yeah, it's just you can't, I mean, I know friends of people that they couldn't go to their loved ones' funerals and all of that. It's really
Well,
awful.
it's really unimaginable, but we've all forgotten, which again is why I think that it's just good to have this book because it is so unbelievable what happened. So you have
Yeah,
all this stuff that behind closed doors, experts, unelected officials, the military, it's not a public health response. It's a full on psychological response. It's an
yeah,
economic response. So everyone is being locked down, even though they know that it's a flu,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
And so
Yeah,
what did you discover? Like, what is that in the service of, right? Lockdown till vaccine.
yeah,
In
yeah, yeah,
parallel, all
yeah,
of this rapid
yeah.
development is happening. If you want to talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So the idea of locking down was, again, it's a psychological operation. So people are so desperate for it to be lifted. And the only way they're going to lift it is, oh, we have this savior vaccine. We have
Mhm.
this. And I can talk a lot about this. So, because obviously it's not a vaccine. I can talk about the rise of the mRNA technology. I really sort of dissect that and go into that because this technology. So again, going back to the 311, that
Mhm.
date. So pre 311, no, Moderna and BioNTech failed to bring to market any of their mRNA products. They just failed because they never passed the safety testing.
Right.
They never went
Right.
past phase one. So from the 2010s, this was all documented because of the toxicity, especially of the lipid
Right.
nanoparticles. This
Right.
this this which is encases the synthetic, the modified mRNA,
Mhm.
and so you have that happening. You have, which is interesting, and I do talk about this. You have a DARPA program manager talking about, and I'm these chapters begin with these epigraphs, quotes, key quotes. Each
Mhm.
chapter has an interesting quote. And he just says, why would we need to wait 8 to 10 years to have a vaccine developed, approved?
Because that's
How
the
about,
typical way that we
yeah,
have developed
yeah,
vaccines in the past.
yeah,
Whatever you think of vaccines, they
yeah,
take a long time to develop and
yeah,
they're
yeah,
tested
yeah,
more than 25 days or
yeah.
whatever it
What if
is.
we could do it in like record time? What if we could do it, and then you have, again, pre 2020, just going back to my timeline, 2019, you have a panel taking place at the Milken Institute. There you have Fauci on a panel with
Yeah.
Rick Bright. Rick Bright was leading BARDA at the time. and a New York Times journalist as well. And they're having this discussion, this sort of Q&A, and then I think they what comes out of that, I think it's Rick Bright saying, what we need a disruptive event to blow up the traditional egg-grown vaccine process. We need a disruptive event to blow up the system that's not beholden to any bureaucratic strings or processes. And he's talking about the mRNA technology here. And what comes out of 311 is this ushering in this sort of, if you think about a theater, it's almost like mRNA technology enters stage left, it comes in.
Right on cue.
Lift the curtain, there it is, ready. It's always been waiting in the wings. They've been desperate to bring it out. It is a DARPA technology, DARPA and Moderna hand in hand, they were built, developing that, but it is a DARPA technology.
And what they meant by no strings attached, what they're saying is we need a catastrophe so that we can rush this through without typical regulatory oversight, which is exactly what happened.
Which is exactly what happened. We need to rush through, skip all the hurdles, skip all the safety hurdles, essentially, which is what they did. I mean, from late 2021, when I was writing for Trial Site News, a lot of my reporting was digging through all the Pfizer documents, those Pfizer papers. So my first report was sort of late 2021, and my interview, so I was interviewed by an Australian media company because I dug through and I found this cumulative analysis of adverse event report. This is Pfizer's own paper, own review that was submitted to the FDA. Remember, I'm sure your audience knows the FDA wanted the public to wait till 2096 to release all these documents.
75 years to release documents that we own as taxpayers in the United States. Yeah.
So these court-ordered release of these documents, obviously I was able to sift through thousands of these documents. So that came out, I wrote that in late 2021. That was a really damning report because that was looking at post rollout, the first 3 months, what was documented, the first three, these safety adverse events. So you've got like over 1,200 deaths happening post rollout. You have women being a lot more affected, women three times more affected. So I wrote about that.
And these are all, this is Pfizer's data about their own product. This is Pfizer's
data, and this is what the FDA
That's important to know.
Yeah, it's really important to know. A lot of neurological effects. There's actually 8 pages of side effects at the back of the document. There's 8 pages, and it's just listing all these, this really weird, like some of them so obscure, these side effects. And that gets, so that we only know about that because a group of medical professionals took the FDA to court. But going back to, sorry.
That's okay. And this is, again, there's so much here that it's really hard to skim over the topic of it. And but it's anyway, let's just dig into whatever. And there's all of it is so important. And it's so huge. And I don't want to forget to make the arc to the fact that there's been no reconciliation and people are like, well, that's over, but everything is still in place. So let's make sure we touch on that at the end. But so the Pfizer documents are out. They've done this 3-month post release study of safety. It's not great. The FDA knows about it. Pfizer knows about it. The public doesn't really know about it.
Public doesn't know about it at all. And I start writing about it end of 2021. So that gets published on Trial Site News. And I get interviewed by this Australian media company, like very shortly afterwards. They're like, because no one's writing about this stuff, and this is,
or maybe they are, but it's not getting the light of day. Who knows, right?
This is before like Naomi Wolf's book, the Pfizer paper book, this is way before. So they interview me, and that interview of me goes absolutely viral on YouTube. Like it gets like 3 million views in like a day or two.
It tells you something.
And then it just gets removed. And I have snapshots of that, not in the book, but like just in my own, like, like this is crazy. Like it just got And I'm just citing Pfizer's own data.
Right.
Look, this report, this was released, and I am not sensationalizing
Mhm.
it. It's not clickbait. I'm literally reading the data.
Right.
And that gets removed because YouTube censors. Don't forget YouTube, Google owned YouTube. Again, that's part of the censorship apparatus. That's part of the Trusted News
Right.
Initiative. Okay, that's lockstep. All of them, the media, the big tech companies, media, all working together to
And
censor.
educational institutions too. Let's not forget,
Yeah.
because there are centers for eh, misinformation management at universities too. I just want to point that out.
Yes, 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 absolutely. And wow, so you have that, but just going back with the safety, because I remember, and my trail of thought. So it's when I was digging through those papers, this is also the non-clinical trial documents.
Mhm.
It was showing early on that there were no plans of any genotoxicity studies, no carcinogenicity studies. They were not going to do any of those studies. And why? Because it was classified as a vaccine. But this product is not. It is a gene-based technology.
Mhm.
Even Moderna and biotech, in their own Security Exchange Commission filings, they classify it as a gene therapy product. But the regulators all dealt with it like it was a traditional vaccine, and they skipped all these studies. And even though two of the four compounds that make up the lipid nanoparticles are completely novel. And when a novel product is used in a vaccine, you have to do these safety,
Right.
because it's never been used. They didn't do it. So they absolutely should have. So this is really awful. I mean,
And they didn't do it post-marketing either.
they never did it.
And
They
these
never
products continue to be injected.
continue. And also, let's not forget pregnant women. So I discovered in 2023, around March, April 2023, I discovered this is Pfizer's own document. Remember, we would get every month or so, we would get documents dispatched,
Right.
on the website, and I would be digging through those, sort of like a data dump of all these
Mhm.
trove of documents. And I found, and I was the first journalist to find this, and I was on Redacted being interviewed about it, because I broke the story of this review, this Pfizer's pregnancy and lactation review document. And it was like, I think it was only 8 pages long. It was so damning because this document was signed off by the FDA in April 2021. And the data is so disturbing. It talks about harms to breastfeeding infants, so harms through the vaccinated mothers passing it on through the breast milk, these infants being harmed. Also, a lot of premature deaths, a lot of spontaneous abortions. Essentially, these are miscarriages going on, and all documented, and awful, awful data.
In
3 days.
2021.
They knew about this in April 2021 because it's dated, the document submitted to the FDA. 3 days later, you have the CDC promoting it in pregnant women. This is 3 days after the signature, the FDA signing off on it. So egregious, harms to the unborn child, pregnant women. And it's it's heavily pushed on pregnant women.
Mhm.
And they make them so afraid. Like, if you don't
Mhm.
take it, your baby's going to die. All of these awful things will happen to you. You'll get so ill if you get COVID.
Was there any evidence at that time that that was really the case? Because, we're a year in after that. Like, you're a year out from when the pandemic was declared.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can understand if it was such a risky thing that you would say, okay, your baby's probably going to die. You're probably going to die. You might as well take the shot. But it
Yeah.
wasn't that. And it was also, and also alongside that was they knew about myocarditis in young people.
Oh, yeah.
And that preceded their pushing for colleges to mandate this all
Yes.
across the country. So
Yeah.
but the pregnant woman thing is the worst. but
It's
this is a
really
close
awful.
second.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And and this again goes back to censorship. So anybody talking about these harms or discovering censored, you're not allowed to talk about it. You know,
Even if it's your own harm, like people who were on social media
yes,
got
yes,
deplatformed because they
ye-
were talking about their own injuries
yes, which
from
I
this.
definitely document in the book,
Yeah.
absolutely. And also the Trusted News Initiative's involvement in that, which was it's helmed by the BBC. I'm not sure if your audience is aware. It's helmed by the BBC, the TNI. So
What do you mean held? Like they kind of
helmed
run
like
it?
led. It's led. They
Oh,
ran
helmed.
it.
Okay. Yeah,
Helmed. Yeah.
I was wondering because there was the BBC was intervening on some. Now this makes sense. Some people on social media saying some things, and they went
Yeah.
after them, and so now that
Yeah.
makes sense that they
Yeah.
were
So what
involved
they
with
did
that.
is they flagged and I've discussed this before. It's in the book, it's documented with screenshots of this BBC article as well. So they flagged these, and these are, don't forget, these are vaccine injured groups who, and
Mhm.
it's their Facebook accounts, but they
They're just
brand them.
providing each other
Yes,
support.
support.
Yes.
They BBC brand these groups as anti-vax groups. Okay, so they get like anti-vax groups using carrot emojis to circumvent the censors. So they flag that, and they are flagging Facebook to take down these
Mhm.
accounts. So then you've got BBC working with technology, big tech to again this coordinated censorship happening, and it's awful, absolutely awful. There's a lot of interviews in the book as well. I've interviewed Maddie de Garay's mother,
Mhm.
Stephanie. Maddie was in the adolescent, that she was 12 at the time. She was part of Pfizer's adolescent trial, clinical
Severely
trial,
injured.
severely vaccine injured. They put her adverse events down to, these are life altering injuries, down to abnormal stomach pain. It's so awful, so awful. And the trial investigator absolutely knew what was going on with her because she was constantly going into ER, to Cincinnati Children's Hospital
Mhm.
emergency room. So they knew, but it was it was, classified as
Yeah.
something else. And I look through a lot of the trial data was really interesting because I found so many anomalies with these case report forms. These are participants in the major Pfizer trial, which they herald as some great success, right? It gets published in the
95% effective or whatever it
yeah,
was, safe
absolutely.
and effective.
So safe and effective. When I found additional deaths, right, from the participants, they were classified that death, but it's because this participant got withdrawn. So I mean, yeah. So this is all documented in the book. So these sort of missing, I found a missing third death that never got reported and never got published in the big pivotal study that was published. And yeah, I mean, it's just, and let's not forget also, since we're talking about the sort of censorship as well, is how early COVID treatments, what happened there, with hydroxychloroquine, with ivermectin.
Mhm.
You have all of the, there was this, I sort of go into that in a lot of detail because I
Mhm.
think the way those cheap generic repurposed drugs who'd been around for decades,
With
okay,
great safety
great,
profiles,
great,
amazing safety profiles.
great long-term safety
Mhm.
data there. Ivermectin is listed in the World Health Organization's list of essential medicines. And so you have, and I sort of zoom in these studies. So there was a study done, I think it was published, I think it was in the Lancet, and it was a very large data set where they basically, what came out, this is for hydroxychloroquine, and this is around the time that Trump is talking about this drug. Elon Musk is posting about it. Oh, we should try hydroxychloroquine.
Mhm.
We've got in France, you've got Dr. Didier Raoult from Marseille in France, with his Marseille protocol, which uses this drug and zinc and azithromycin. You've got in New York, you've got from Brooklyn, Vladimir Zelenko, the doctor there promoting this drug, because they're seeing the track record. They're seeing with their patients great success out of it. So anyway, a study gets published, and it says that it caused cardiac arrests or cardiac issues with these patients when they were given hydroxychloroquine. So it's like a dangerous drug. Now, what is really interesting is that there's one company that provided the whole data set of 96,000 patients across so many different continents. It's called Surgisphere, based in Chicago, an unknown company at the time, but became infamous obviously later because it was completely faked data that the authors had to retract the study. But the damage had already been done, because on the back of that, and literally the same data, the same day the paper's published, you have the BBC, the New York Times, all the legacy media releasing these articles. Trump's drug is dangerous, it causes heart attacks, and all trumpeting the same story, the same narrative. And you have what is really awful and egregious. You have the trials. So these trial arms, there were certain, for the World Health Organization was trialing it. There were other, I think Oxford University was trialing it. They all completely suspend the trial arm for hydroxychloroquine in these studies based on that. Okay. The FDA revokes their emergency use authorization for the drug as an early COVID treatment. That gets revoked. And isn't that interesting? Just all the timing of everything. And
well, I think they didn't really, it's so clear that they didn't want alternatives that would break through, easily usable alternatives. So, and again, because we're starting to gallop up on time, and there's just so much here, which is fine. But I want to make sure we get to a couple of things. So the censorship, all of those apparatuses are still in place. Even though we can say the word vaccine on social media now, there is still that apparatus is in place. So there are still people being damped down and censored for certain things that should not even be controversial at this point. So that is one thing. And we got used to it, which is another thing. Like, where's the outrage? It just, people were not outraged enough. And also a lot of people probably didn't notice it was happening. But the other thing that is very chilling to me is that vaccine mandates, vaccine passports, that was a big agenda that, people couldn't move through society without having their papers. In the case of the US, I don't think we ever got into a digital situation with that, but I think other countries did. Can you talk a little bit about that briefly and why that's so important for what's possible in the future? Like why that was a really important thing.
Absolutely. So so the book sort of ends, the final chapter is the sort of rise of digital authoritarianism that we are seeing play out across the West. So it's like a warning. It's so alarming what's going on. And then you've got to, throw in AI to, put that in the mix, and you have real time, people being, censored or tracked or under surveillance. Surveillance is key here. So you have, the vaccine
key in the pandemic response, right?
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. And what comes out of it, right? What comes out of it? So we have this rise of this digital authoritarian. So vaccine passports. Now that was used as like a proof of concept that people's rights. So rights would be conditional on compliance. Okay. But if you comply, you get to go out, you get to go to a restaurant, you get to go to the supermarket, you get to fly. Many people were coerced to take the shot, these gene-based shots, because they wanted to fly, they wanted to go on holiday, all of these things.
Or maybe they wanted to work or to go to school. Like when people say, oh, nobody had to get the shot, that is just not true.
Yeah, absolutely. That is just so awful, So it's right to work.
Yeah, your right to be in society without an injection, especially, let me point out, because this is one of my big points, it didn't prevent transmission. So there was no reason,
Yeah.
there was
Yeah.
no real reason to have a passport.
But also the trials themselves, this is
Yes.
like the laughable, were never designed to
Right.
prevent transmission.
Right.
So, and that was known early on, but that
Yes.
only came out a bit later, and there was a
Right.
bit of a hoo-ha about it. Then it
Right.
kind of went quiet. But
But
then
so
when
they're setting the surveillance in place. So you're saying
Yeah.
proof of concept. Go on
Yeah,
there.
it's a proof of concept, the vaccine passports for digital IDs. This is how I see it, the way it's playing out. And the digital IDs and all of that is in accordance with the UN agenda, their 2030 agenda with their sustainable development goals. And there's SDG 16.9, which is that it mandates universal legal identity for all by 2030. So this is sort of the funnel, the effect of all of this. It's to prepare people for that,
Sure.
You want to go here, you got to show your ID or some kind of, or, your vaccination status, right? Because we know that, they keep warning us that, there's another pandemic around the corner. There's always we have the UK government just a few weeks ago pledging £1 billion to go to pandemic response. You've got the pandemic treaty with the World Health Organization, with their revisions of their international health regulations.
And let me just point out that Brownstone has a working, or they have a working group that's run out of it's in a university. I can't believe I can't remember the name, but like David Bell, and
Yes, David Bell. Yeah.
he's been on the show talking about this pandemic industry that has popped up that is not a public health response. It's a military response, and it's just funneling tons of money. So that's a separate issue. It's a separate show altogether. To prepare for this. But I mean, what better way to get people to accept a digital ID or the monitoring of people than so that, get them to fear for their lives.
Yeah.
And
don't forget, they always use the banner of safety,
right?
It's always for your safety. And the last chapter is actually called For Your Safety. It's always for your safety. So it's like, so now if you factor in AI, and involved in mass surveillance, it's your phone, going out with your phone, trackable, what you're spending, what you're buying, it's extremely dystopian, what can come out of all of this. So the book sort of ends on that kind of thing, but I mean, I didn't want to end it in really too pessimistic, because the reason why I wrote the book is to, yes, of course, it's to, give it to your friend that is doubting, or you want, like, this is really what went on. I absolutely, I want people to read it, to learn. But yes, it's to give knowledge and truth to come forth as antidote to everything that had went on, all the lies, all the deception. It was a mass deception that went on. And people deserve to know the truth. They deserve to know what happened, so they can be prepared for next time when something comes along that they're trying to force down upon everyone and get people to conform and comply and all of these things, that so they don't need to be, so they're not left afraid and just living in fear and then succumbing to all of this. Because when you are afraid, it arrests your critical thinking skills.
Clearly.
Absolutely. You are if they're literally, you'll jump, whatever it's so it's really, really criminal. And so that was one of the main aims of writing, and to, of course, document everything. But not only that, it's joining the dots.
Yes.
It's the time. It's like, oh, the picture becomes clearer, because I really saw it as like a jigsaw puzzle that I'm finding one piece here and one piece there, and the truth. So it's daylight is the best disinfectant out of all of this. So I see the book being, I guess, a source of daylight there to bring it all into the light.
Well, and it definitely is. And I'm not just a fan, I'm not fangirling you here, but I am kind of. What you've done is you've constructed a tome of data that supports every single claim or every single thing you've put forward in a way that's digestible, accessible, and what it does is it lifts the curtain and lets people see the machinery that brought this into place. Because to me, that's really important that people understand it, because there is a next time. It might be upon us already. I don't know if we're going to have an energy lockdown. They're talking now about this crazy virus that
Yep.
usually isn't
Antivirus.
transmissible human to human, and now all of a sudden,
Yeah.
and maybe I'm a little too skeptical, but I am very concerned at what they want to do next to forward these agendas that are very global in nature. So I think the value of your book, aside from being an essential part of a historical record, especially in print, because things that are digital can be they can be altered in
Yeah.
retrospect, and that's happening, all the time on the internet. But for somebody to have a copy of the historical record, even in 20, 50 years, it's important that this was documented. And it also it helps people come along to seeing what happened when maybe they didn't see it in real time, or they still don't think that that was possible. It's such a well-documented book. I can't recommend it enough. And plus it's a joy to read. And I'm not really crazy about nonfiction, to be honest. So, it was really
I
a
mean,
delight.
I sort of wrote it like a documentary.
Yeah,
It's sort of like a documentary in a book. Maybe one day I might make it into documentary. I don't know, but it really, no, I'm really thrilled how the it I that it's easy to read, that it's not
totally.
so like, oh god, like pulling teeth to like, oh,
Not at all.
yeah. So I'm like, when I read back on it myself, I'm like, that really I can tell, it. And people have written some comments like it kind of reads like an international thriller,
It
and I'm
does.
like, wait, well, yeah, but it's true.
Yeah.
This. It's not a movie, I
Yeah.
wish it was a movie.
Yeah.
I wish it was a movie,
It'd
but
be hard to make up.
we all lived through this. We all
Yeah.
did, and
And there's been very little to no accountability. And
yeah,
that's the disheartening part, and why this is so valuable.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
before we break, I just wanted to ask you, like, what are you working on now, and what are you most concerned about going forward, or
Yeah.
optimistic about, I should say?
Oh, optimistic. I think there is. I think there is quite a mass awakening with what went on. I mean, I hope this book helps in pushing that forward a bit more people waking up. So I don't think people can easily get hoodwinked again, So I think next time if they say everyone locked down, there's another, I think there'll be a little bit more pushback. People won't be so easily led,
Mm.
right, by the words of so few. Okay. And so I am hopeful and optimistic on that. I have started to write on a new project, which I can't really talk about, but it's sort of, we'll see. And but yeah, I mean, I am optimistic on the and what I'm worried about most again is this yes, this rise of digital authoritarianism happening in the West. We're seeing that across the EU. We're seeing this in the UK. And we didn't quite touch on because there wasn't much time, but in the
Mm.
book I talk about CCDH. This is the Center for Countering Digital Hate, which is a NGO based in the UK and in the US, and they were integral in this censorship playbook. It's their playbook that,
Mhm.
and they advised governments like the UK, and this is why we've got the Online Safety Act in
Mhm.
the UK. So, and we have in the EU the Digital Services Act, and the CCDH advised these, the EU and the UK government on these policies, which are promoting, mass surveillance, censorship.
In the
It's
name of safety.
in the name of safety. Absolutely, it's always in the name of safety. And I see, yeah. So the idea of like, they don't want real discourse. They don't, like they just shut down debate. all the dissenting voices, were spied on. And we know, I mean, I write about these secretive Whitehall units, government units in the UK, in the UK, spying on their citizens. And we know, obviously, in the US with the Twitter files and what came out of that, a landmark legal case, Missouri versus Biden, and what came out of that, where we have government federal agencies coercing big tech to deplatform, censor US citizens.
Right.
And they complied, the big tech, because they were threatened with regulatory action, right? Section 230 and all of this. So this is unprecedented, what went on. So
well, maybe you could come back and we can have a whole discussion on what's happening digitally in the UK and also in the US, because it's terrifying, and it's picking up really quickly, and people just aren't aware.
Well, I'm worried we're just going to end up like China. So, of course, if you think about it, how China exported lockdowns, right? That was the testing ground was Wuhan, right? We got to all experience lockdowns. They're exporting their surveillance of their citizens and their social credit system, right? This is the dystopian future that might be, lying ahead of us, which is just
maybe already here.
Or maybe, yes, already here. Absolutely. So this is what people need to be really aware of. And I'd be happy to come back on to talk about it some more.
I would love that. Before we go, where can people find you? And I'll also put in the show notes a link to this fantastic book. But if you have any socials or Substacks you'd like us to highlight.
Absolutely. Well, they can follow me on X at Sonia, SONIA _Elijah, ELIJAH. And I have a Substack called Sonia Elijah Investigates. And the book can be, actually, it's kind of sold, every Barnes and Noble, Amazon, all, everywhere. So it's quite accessible, and it's available as an ebook, Kindle, and paperback and hardcover as well.
Great. I highly recommend it. As I think I said 100 times, get the print version so it doesn't ever go away and it's on your shelf. And get some for your friends who might be a little bit skeptical that this wasn't, if they think this was as it seemed. So anyway, it was a delight to talk to you, Sonia. Thank you for your wonderful work. And let's do another one on digital stuff.
Absolutely. Thank you, Joni. Really, I really enjoyed talking with you today.
Great.
Take care.
Great.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.